28, Senator Mendoza, SB 760, the Disadvantaged Community Enhancement Act of 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senators, I'm here to present SB 760. First, I would like to thank the committee staff for their work and the analysis on this bill to address concerns raised by the analysis regarding the use of greenhouse gas reduction funds and concerns that there is not a sufficient nexus for the projects outlined in the bill. I propose an amendment to strike provisions in the bill related to the use of cap-and-trade auction revenue. Should the bill move out of this committee today, I commit to working with the stakeholders and committee staff to identify an alternative and appropriate funding source for the bill as part of the appropriations process.
Right, so everybody understands the amendment. It has the chair's support. Witnesses in support of the measure.
Very good. Mr. Chair and members, Doug Houston representing the Watershed Conservation Authority. The WCA is a JPA formed between the LA County Flood Control Agency and the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy. And since its inception, SB 760 has attempted to find ways to direct funding for park recreation and green space purposes in some of California's most urbanized, disadvantaged community settings in the state, particularly in riparian corridors. We think the concept was affirmed by this body by virtue of its 10-to-1 vote in Transportation Committee, and we hope to replicate that here today.
Thank you. Others in support?
Yeah, Mark Fenstermaker on behalf of the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority, also here in support. Much like the previous speaker, we do a lot of work along riparian corridors and bringing green spaces into the urban center. Urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California in support.
Very good. Opposition to SB 760? Seeing none, we return to the committee. Questions of the author? Seeing none, is there a motion? Senator Gaines, you may close.
Mr. Chair, no questions. Respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Please call the roll.
Item 28, SB 760 by Senator Mendoza. The motion is due pass as amended and refer to Committee on Appropriations. Senators Wieckowski?
Aye.
Wieckowski, aye. Gaines? Aye. Gaines, aye. Bates? Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Jackson? Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Pavley?
Aye.
Pavley, aye.
5-0. You have sufficient votes. Your measure is out. Good luck. Final five. We're good. Last five. Let's turn to our reconsideration calendar. Item number 31, SB 162 by Senator Galgiani.
Any changes?
Yes, we'll hear from the senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. First, I would like to thank you for working with me and making some suggestions that you believe would be acceptable to the members of the committee, and I think it will be a good bill. I would like to accept the committee amendments to establish a new sunset date of June 1st, 2020, a new report for the committee to evaluate the program prior to the next sunset date, and allow the department to amend treated wood waste regulations. These are the amendments that I'm accepting to the original bill, which would extend the operation of the treated wood waste program, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Others in support of SB 162?
Thank you, Chairman Wieckowski. I'll be very brief because we had a hearing on this a while back. Kathy Lynch representing the Western Wood Preservers Institute in support of this measure. This is a very important program that's been in place for over a decade now, and this allows for the disposal of treated wood waste in a composite line landfill with management standards, and we look forward to this program being extended. Thank you.
Others in support?
Michael Pimentel with Placer County and the Solid Waste Association of North America in support.
Mike Rogi with the California Manufacturers and Technology Association in support.
Tom Jacob with the Chemical Industry Council of California in support. We view this as the type of program the legislature should embrace. An excellent collaborative effort. Thank you.
Amy Mago on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce in support.
Excellent. Opposition to SB 162 as amended? Seeing none, let's bring it back to committee. There's a motion by Senator Hill. It's my intention, Senator Galgiani, to pen a letter to DST to explain my eagerness to have them actually go through and give us a report so we can know. We've had an oversight hearing some time ago, earlier today, with DTSC, so we want to let them know that we're interested in this. There's a motion. You may close.
Yes, thank you. And I just wish to say thank you again for working with me and helping me to come up with some amendments that would make the bill acceptable and would be a better bill in the long run. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Assistant, call the roll.
Item 31, SB 162 by Senator Galgiani. The motion is due pass as amended and refer to Committee on Appropriations. Senators Wykowski?
Aye.
Wykowski, aye. Gaines? Aye. Gaines, aye. Bates? Aye. Bates, aye. Hill? Aye. Hill, aye. Jackson? Aye. Jackson, aye. Leno? Aye. Leno, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye.
That's 7-0? 7-0. Congratulations, your bill's out.
Thank you.
Let's go to the top of the calendar. Item number 4, SB 180, addressing emissions of greenhouse gases and the production of electricity.
Very
Senator
simple bill.
Jackson, oh yeah.
Well, my notes say good morning. We are at good afternoon and almost good evening. So I first want to start by thanking the committee for its thorough and thoughtful analysis, and I will be accepting the amendments suggested in the analysis as author's amendments. I'll speak very briefly about the energy issues in SB 180 for context, but then it is my hope we can focus this discussion on environmental quality, as we've already been heard in the Energy Committee a week ago. And given that environmental quality is the jurisdiction of this committee, it's my hope that we can focus on that so we can get through this in a reasonable, relatively short period of time. In the governor's joint inaugural and State of the State address, in fact, even today, he announced and articulated a vision for California to reduce the excessive release of carbon dioxide and other pollutants into the atmosphere by 2030. In fact, today, I think he ramped it up even higher than what he had previously. This measure, SB 180, will help accomplish this goal by creating new emissions performance standards that limit the amount of carbon dioxide power plants may emit. This is a tried and true policy, and indeed in 2006, Senator Parada authored SB 1368, which established an emission performance standard for baseload power plants. We will have to rely more and more on power plants that operate below baseload capacity, however, due to the increasing penetration of solar, wind, and other intermittent renewable sources of energy. Because the power plants that can respond to fluctuations in energy supply don't operate at baseload capacities, they are exempt from the current emissions performance standard. In recognizing the changing landscape of electricity generation in California, this measure creates two new emissions performance standards, one for peaking generation, another for non-peaking generation, in order to bring all power plants under this successful policy. Now, one of the common themes from the opposition to SB 180 is that the CEC declined to lower the emissions performance standard in 2012. From this, they conclude that SB 180 is unnecessary. Their conclusions, however, fail to recognize that the emissions performance standards that the CEC declined to lower only applied to baseload power. This is why SB 180 brings all power plants under emissions performance standards and gives the CPUC and CEC, in consultation with the California Independent System Operator and the Air Resources Board, again, all the agencies who are charged with meeting these lower reductions, it gives them the flexibility necessary to make sure California meets its climate goals while keeping the lights on. Rather than codify a number that may need to shift over time, this measure directs these agencies to themselves together to determine how best to distinguish between peaking and non-peaking generation, and then to set the emission performance standards as low technologically feasible without putting the reliability of the electrical grid and electric service at risk. SB 180 also includes language that requires the emissions performance standards to be set at a level that will not hamper the further deployment of renewable energy generation or the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. They get their charge, their mandate, their directive, and within those confines, they will be the ones to establish what these standards are. This also further requires the PUC and CEC to revise both emissions performance standards every 5 years based on technological advances. This will ensure that new power plants in California are the cleanest that we can build. So it gives that flexibility as well. Finally, in recognition that carbon capture and sequestration may be required to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from dirtier plants, SB 180 clarifies existing law that the process that the California Energy Commission uses to approve new power plants may also be used for any carbon capture and sequestration project associated with a power plant. SB 180 also opens the door for better research and carbon capture and sequestration technology development in California by removing technology-specific language requiring carbon to be, quote, injected in geological formations, end quote. There'll be a test on this in 5 minutes, so please, I hope you've all absorbed it. But basically, we are looking for being able to move with alacrity, rationality, and with an updated view of what we can do to reduce these carbon emissions using the agencies that exist who have responsibility for these areas, and to do it in a way that is going to still maintain the resources that we need while doing it in the most efficient, energy efficient and carbon reducing efficient way possible.
First witness.
First witness, Edward Moreno of the Sierra Club, and then Matt Reed of Breathe California are the witnesses.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. Again, I'm Eddie Moreno on behalf of Sierra Club California, and we are in strong support of this bill. This bill will help address air pollution at ground level, which creates harmful smog and will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a major contributor to climate disruption. It does so by, as stated earlier, it does so by establishing stronger emission performance standards for baseload power plants in the state, but it also creates new performance standards for peaker power plants. While Californians will benefit from the new standards, it is important to note that the majority of the power plants, especially older peaker power plants, are located in disadvantaged communities. Those communities are typically already overburdened by industrial and vehicular air pollution, and this bill will bring some reprieve. The emission performance standard will also reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That is, the standard will help California continue its efforts to slow and reverse the impacts of climate disruption, including drought, forest fires, sea level rise, worsened air quality, and increased vector-borne diseases. SB 180 will ensure that if new fossil fuel power plants are built in the state, they are the cleanest possible in using the best technology, and it will also encourage the phase out of those of the dirtiest power plants in the state. I respectfully urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Matt Reed, and I'm here on behalf of Breathe California. Breathe California is a network of 5 independent organizations committed to fighting for clean air and healthy lungs. As part of that mission, we recognize the unique threat to public health that climate change poses, and we are committed to supporting legislation that will reduce the severity and mitigate the impacts of climate change. We stand in strong support of Senate Bill 180. As the members of this committee may remember from the informational hearing held on February 25th, researchers predict that climate change will increase the frequency and severity of extreme weather events, including heat waves, wildfires, and droughts. These events will have severe impacts on our state's water quality, air quality, and the spread of infectious disease. Higher average temperatures and heat waves will lead to a decreased amount of surface water and increased amounts of ground-level pollutants such as ozone. Even with conservative emissions scenarios, major metropolitan areas in California are projected to have more extreme heat days each year by the end of the century. Hotter days mean increased energy demand and more reliance on so-called peaker plants. Because these plants aren't subject to the performance standards we hold baseload power generating plants to, we can expect that there will be even more pollution in the air that we breathe. California must take every measure possible to reduce our GHG emissions so we can mitigate the public health impacts of climate change as much as possible. At the same time, we must be vigilant that we protect the immediate pollution impacts of the reality of climate change, hotter days. We cannot afford to unwittingly roll back our progress on cleaning up the state's energy production. I respectfully urge your aye vote.
Others in support?
Mr. Chair, members, Brian Early on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund in support.
Katrina Robinson on behalf of Ada Gen in support.
Jenna Price with the California League of Conservation Voters in support.
Taya Wood with Clean Power Campaign, also in support.
We have one more coming up.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Toyola Coalition for Clean Air in support.
All right, excellent. All right, let's turn our attention to opposition. Will the opposition please come forward?
Opposition to this bill?
No.
Actually, I thought I'd just drop by for dinner. How are you? Thank you, Chair Wachowski and members of the committee. We recognize Senator Jackson's commitment to help clean up the environment and to, by the way, I'm Jan Smutney-Jones. I'm from the Independent Energy Producers. We're impacted by this bill. We oppose SB 180 because it creates yet another standard which is unlikely to lead to any significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but will basically lead to a whole lot of time and energy being spent arguing and actually re-arguing issues regarding the role of gas and the role of biomass in our society. IEP represents the baseload generators covered under the current emissions performance standard, and we supported that bill. We supported AB 32, and we were the first people in the pool on cap and trade. So by no way are we trying to avoid the issues related to climate change and CO2 emissions, but we think that this bill actually is overkill. We represent the non-peaking, which is an undefined term in this bill, of a wide variety of different resources, which could include not only the current baseload resources, but combined heat and power. The bill inexplicably rolls in biomass, landfill, and wastewater treatment plants. This is an issue that was settled at the PUC 7 years ago. Some people who support this bill, I know, didn't like the outcome of that, but there's really no reason to relitigate that. A number of you have landfills in your districts. A number of you have wastewater facilities in your districts that will be impacted by this bill. But the point is the bill really accomplishes very little. Okay, the reason peakers weren't included in the emissions performance standard is they don't operate very much. Okay, they operate less than 5% of the time. There's a new generation of plants that are coming in that are basically, they have fast ramp. They're absolutely necessary for us to be able to integrate the renewable resources of the state of California. I represent about 85% of the delivered RPS in California. And if we're going to expand that, we're going to need to have a flexible gas fleet that can respond appropriately to the needs of the grid. So, there's basic problems with SB 180. Many of these resources are already covered under the existing standard. Many of these resources, if they hit a threshold, have to jump into cap and trade directly. Those, the smaller plants, basically are being impacted by cap and trade because their fuel now is in cap and trade. So no one's getting a free lunch here from the standpoint if you're buying fossil fuels. As I indicated earlier, this relitigates the biomass, landfill gas, and biogas issue. It creates potentially a new standard for a combined cycle, for CHP plants, combined heat and power plants of all sizes, and requires new proceedings at the PUC and Energy Commission. We think the time of these agencies and CARB could be better spent actually trying to address issues that significantly lower carbon. Now, we did, Senator Jackson and I had a very good meeting, I thought, on talking about carbon capture and sequestration. This is an area that the legislature will need to pay attention to because there are legal and regulatory issues associated with that, and we would encourage her to pursue that as perhaps other course here. But again, we do not believe there's any evidence that suggests that this is this new standard is actually going to lead to lower emissions. And while the rest of the country is reveling in the fact that we're able to displace coal with natural gas, there are some in California trying to turn gas into the new coal in California. We think that that's inappropriate, and we respectively have to oppose SB 180. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Gil Topidi with the California Municipal Utilities Association. We remain opposed to Senator Jackson's bill because, as the analysis begins to note, that the 1386 process was a backstop to prevent future coal purchases. And so it set the emissions rate on the energy efficiency of natural gas pegged at that time. And in looking at the bill and the issues of the code section that it wants to replace, the analysis notes that in 2012, the CEC did look into this matter. They thought that because of where we were trending now with our integration of renewables, that they didn't want to act on it. There's nothing wrong with revisiting whether or not this agency needs to act on it, but the code section already exists on page 12. Lines 4 through 10 speak to the authority, at least on the non-peaking side, that the senator is going after. So we would argue that not only does the CEC already have the power to look at this, the bill also does not consider all the local air district rules that are in place and EPA rules are in place and what's called new source review and best available control technology. So there's already a process embedded to ensure that all rebuilt, remaintained, updated facilities are of the latest technology. All repairs are repaired with best available control technology that then becomes the standard going forward. So if it's already the best, then we're already achieving further emissions reductions just with every generation of these facilities. I think the author and her supporters kind of described to you what's going on in their acknowledgement that as we integrate what conceivably passed through this committee, conceivably could be 50% renewable resources, renewable RPS eligible resources by 2030, you kind of have to marry that with another support power, and that support power will be rampable facilities. Our biggest concern right now on the peaking side, which would be brand new, and we concede that, let's have that discussion, is the peaking power plants that my members have are not called certificated. The CEC has processes where at 50 megawatt thresholds or lower, that this is also found in your analysis. There are other processes for the CEC to consider or waive the siting requirements on 50 megawatts up to 100 megawatts under specified conditions. They're not certificated. So we are unclear that should the CEC, CPUC, in making their determination on an emissions performance standard, if we make an investment 3 years ago, 4 years ago on a peaker plant, we calculate not only the cost of the fuel, but the maintenance and life expectancy and the return on paying for the product. Should an EPS be considered and it's reduced 5 years from now, what will happen then to that facility? It's not grandfathered in. It now needs to become certificated. So then there's an investment then that now incurs additional risk, factoring in now we might need to achieve just for routine maintenance, we might now need to hit the new benchmark on a facility that's only 6 years old that we thought still had 13 years of life and payback on our investment. Having to now reinvest what we thought might be a $5 million replacement or fix to be turned into a $105 million, you need to raise it to the next level of EPS. That's a cost consideration and risk mitigation that you just can't sit down and calculate 3 years before, always having to second guess where the agencies are going to do on this. And finally, Mr. Chairman and members, the language, since it kind of ports in the existing 1386 and kind of adds and takes out certain things, it speaks to having the CPUC adopt and develop these processes. And for my guys, it's usually the CEC who has some oversight, who we work with. Then it says the CEC may adopt or shall adopt the same things that the CPUC adopted. Well, we're two different entities going through a regulatory process. I would at least ask the author going forward and the committee to at least consider would be maybe a joint process between the two agencies to develop these standards, because just having the CEC copy the CPUC process, my guys don't operate in the CPUC world. We're not stakeholders there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Do you agree with the other, Mr. Smutney Jones, about that while we give authority to the CEC and the CPUC, they may just increase these variables a little bit? right? It may be a modest improvement, and there's a lot of time that goes into that there may be greater greenhouse gas emission reductions elsewhere.
If I understand you right, that if you're asking me if they end up saying do it a little bit, wouldn't there be other ways, more cost-effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions elsewhere?
Well, especially for your guys that have to go through the certification for the EPS level change.
We would believe that if for remember, this bill has different dimensions. For the non-peaking side, the senator has grandfather clause for the existing facilities that are certificated. So anything we just built 5 years ago. And so for the peaking one, yeah, to go through certification, this new level in 5 years, even if they lower it to a standard where right now, due to the flexible nature of peaking power is not run 24/7. It's used to help flexibility in integrating the renewables. You're asking for some level of additional efficiency that then we might now need to meet and upgrade these facilities, the existing facilities, because I'd argue the new facilities are always more modern and efficient, and they will be as that standard gets developed. But for the existing facilities that need to get certificated, there could then be a cost incurred that if it was not for this process, those same funds might have gone to directing it to more cost-effective programs that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions in these basins further.
We're the EQ committee, so I'm trying to focus on the benefit. The goal is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the peaking plants and giving the authority. So I just thank you for your comments. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Valerie Vlahos, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, and we do respectfully oppose the bill. We do believe it is a flawed approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Right now, as we heard much earlier today, we are discussing, well, there was SB 32, SB 350, where you may have heard from the utilities and others, but mostly the utilities, about having a conversation that's not limited to just certain technology or power generation facilities, but having an integrated conversation about a comprehensive approach. And we feel like that's going to get us the most cost-effective GHG reductions and perhaps reduce the complexity of an already complex electric system. So to add on and maybe slightly correct my distinguished colleague, Mr. Smutny Jones, in a late 2014 CEC report, we're talking about a 1 to 3% capacity on the peaking side of the facilities, which means about 1% of the total electric supply of the state. So that I just offer that point to show that we're talking about this getting very expensive greenhouse gas reductions for such a small piece of electricity, and we would like to look for more cost-effective greenhouse gas reductions. And so with that, I'd have to ask for a no vote.
Sure. Vice Chair Gaines.
If I could just get a clarification from PG&E's perspective, if this legislation is implemented, what happens to the cost of energy?
That's a great question. I don't have a back of the envelope, what is going to happen to the cost of energy. We do, want to have safe, reliable, and affordable power that we supply to our customers. We did look at some contracts and that we have that are long-term, would fall under the bill. And we do think that some of them may not fall under a grandfather clause. So we think there could be some stranded costs, but and quite honestly, I think we need additional evaluation analysis to fully answer your question.
Could we make the assumption that energy costs would go up?
No, but we're the Environmental Quality Committee, so we wouldn't make those.
But bottom line is, I've got a peaker plant in the city of Roseville that was built within the last decade, and you're talking about setting a standard that's higher than the existing standard for when that investment was made. And so there's going to be a cost incurred.
New, if it's for the new ones, that your plant doesn't.
There was part of the testimony was discussion of existing peakers. Correct?
Yeah, we had that. There were amendments taken in the Energy Committee that were not properly reflective of the amendments that were taken, and your committee has been graciously trying to amend those inaccurate
Correct them.
amendments. Yes, to correct the ones. This deals with new power plants.
Okay,
This-
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you
it's
for
not good.
clarifying that.
The goal,
You look at this, it looks like the bill gets amended every couple days. Just kidding. Just kidding. Let's
Ha-ha,
continue.
this hour, huh?
Let's continue with the opposition.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, given the late hour, I will keep this very brief. First off, I think, and relevant to this committee, is the fact that we have a cap and trade system that already takes into account electrical generation. So we already have a system that is taking into account the GHG emissions from electrical power generation. Why do we need another standard to address that issue? In our view, it's duplicative, and that would contribute to higher energy costs. And for manufacturers who are paying 70% above the national average for industrial electricity rates, that is a very severe concern. It does drive investment decisions, given that California is already known to be a high electricity price state, in addition to other challenges that we face. But that being said, not knowing what the standards are, I think it would be difficult to estimate exactly what the costs would be. Suffice it to say, we think that a duplicative standard would add to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Wachowski. Members, very quickly, Nick Pappas with Southern California Edison. Don't want to rehash the comments of the opposition. I'd echo the comments of IEP, PG&E, CMUA, and others about the implementation challenges. But very briefly to your question, which essentially was, how does this fit into the broader integrated strategy of how do we reduce emissions in the electric sector? And respectfully, we appreciate the author's enthusiasm for that. We share that enthusiasm, and we're currently implementing a great number of policies to reduce emissions in the electric sector, some of which have been discussed today. Respectfully, this bill does not give any consideration to whether we could get a more cost-effective emissions reduction through alternative strategies such as renewables, energy efficiency, transportation electrification. What's very important from our perspective at Edison is that we move forward on decarbonizing the electric grid in an integrated pathway moving forward, that we really consider on a dollar per ton basis what are the costs and reliability impacts of different policies. And this bill really operates, frankly, in a vacuum, which doesn't give consideration to those issues. And for those reasons, we must oppose and ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Next.
Mario DiBernardo from the Northern California Power Agency, representing 15 publicly owned utilities in California. We strongly oppose this bill. The CEC's decision, the ink on that decision is barely dry from a lengthy public process where they decided that it is inappropriate to strengthen the EPS at this time because of unintended consequences related to future renewables. They have the authority now to reduce or to strengthen the emission performance standard at any time. They indicated that in their decision, but they found that it was inappropriate to do it last year when they issued the decision, and we agree with them. We think that we should defer to them on this issue and respectfully ask for your no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm Brett Barrow with MSR Public Power Agency, which includes Modesto Irrigation District, Silicon Valley Power, and Redding Electric Utility. We are here today in opposition as well. I'd like to emphasize CMUA's remarks along with the others. And without repeating, I just think that it stands saying again, the original emission performance standard was put into place at a time in California when the cap and trade program was on its way to being implemented, but not fully implemented, as well as some of the other environmental programs were maturing. So I think that we need to take a different approach as we go forward. A more holistic approach has been said that allows for the flexibility to be able to integrate those resources into the grid in a reliable and effective and cost-effective manner. Thank you.
Next.
Matt Klopfenstein on behalf of the Southern California Public Power Authority, also in opposition.
Amy Mago on behalf of the California Chamber of Commerce in opposition.
Anybody else opposed to SB 180? Oh, okay. Okay, Senator, more holistic approach. It seems like you're trying to target some of these dirty facilities. Can you have some comments on the opposition?
Well, first let me just refocus on what this bill does. This bill that we're proposing is a tightening of the current emission performance standard to require all gas plants to comply, the peaker and the non-peaker. That's what this bill is designed to do. So all this other stuff has got me, maybe it's late in the day, but this is not going to, cause the earth to crumble. The bill is modeled after the program that has been effective for the last 9 years in addressing a form of generation that really was creating problems. We're now directing this to another area which is also responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. And what we're trying to do is, as we become more reliant on renewables, which are unpredictable, so we're going to find more peak or not work. We're actually changing this definition, or asking the CEC and the PUC to change this definition to address the realities of a more renewable portfolio of energy production. And what we've had in the past is standards that don't reflect the ability through technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What we do here is we say when a new plant is built, and I recognize that there were some problems with amendments there was just a miscommunication, and now, again, we're correcting those problems. We are saying that when a new plant is built with the new technologies that exist, we're asking every 5 years the CEC, the PUC, the ISO, and the ARB to tell us how we can, with these new technologies, further reduce greenhouse gas emissions with these plants. And we are then going to say to the companies that want to put in these new plants, you've got to comply. The question about whether or not it's going to increase cost, we don't know. It's my hope that it does not, because what we're going to do is use the most updated technologies while we reduce greenhouse gases. That's what we're here to talk about today. And before we know what the cost is, the CEC and the PUC are going to have to set a standard. And this bill says we want them to, you need to balance. There has to be a balance here, because we want to be able to continue having these sources of energy. Therefore, you have to make them affordable. At the same time, maximizing greenhouse gas reductions. I don't know how to say it more simply, because it can get complicated. So again, we're going to try to tighten the current emission performance standards. This is not duplicative. If it is, it's one that's been in place for nearly 9 years already, during which time we've been successful in driving out some of the dirtiest forms of fuel out of California's generation mix. And we're just, oh, by the way, this is actually working in other countries, so we are not inventing something new. Countries like the United Kingdom have all of these policies in play today, and they've recognized that although cap and trade encourages sellers to decrease emissions below the levels of the cap, trading doesn't encourage buyers of credit to decrease their emissions. So that's one tool in the toolbox. This is another tool in the toolbox, and we are, again, relying on those agencies that have the expertise, and they're being directed to do this in the way that is the most practical while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And with that, I would ask for your aye vote.
Very good. Let me make sure you don't refute the testimony that the Energy Commission has the ability to make these rate changes now, or that they decided in, whether it was December of 2014, whatever, recently decided not to do it. The intent of here for the bill is that we want you to look at this every 5 years, whether you want to or not, and tell us on these new plants how we can further reduce the greenhouse gases. Is that?
As I had said in my opening remarks, that claim fails to recognize that the emissions performance standard that the CEC declined to lower only applied to baseload power. We now know, because of the unpredictability, that there will be more so-called peaker operation, and this tries to bring them all into one directed system and set of standards, so that we're going to give them the flexibility necessary to make sure that California meets its climate goals while keeping the lights on. That's what the other mandate is. We don't want to squeeze anybody. We want to be able to balance the latest technologies with what it's going to take to keep these plants going while we integrate more and more renewable energy, which we all know is somewhat less reliable.
Senator Bates.
Yes, don't know if it's the time of day, but the 5-year standard updating every 5 years has me a little confused about what happens to those plants that are in the process. They started in year 1 and they're now in year 3, and then it's going to take them longer to be on up in operation by year 5. Are they going to be subjected to new standards that are developed because technology's caught up, or are those grandfathered? And I'm not sure I...
Yeah, that's a good question. And we'll try to make it clear that... we'll try to make it clear that, you know, if you've gotten approval, that unless it's feasible to do any of the upgrades, I would think that most companies would want to try to maximize their efficiency in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. But that's certainly a good question that, you know, in the spirit of trying to do this, the goal isn't to put anybody out of business. It's to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, recognizing the shifting, higher percentage that the governor and that we as a legislative body are trying to achieve, that we do that in the most practical and feasible way in order to reduce those GHG emissions.
Well, Senator Jackson, may I suggest that the implementing regulation on that particular point needs to be pretty specific so that that plant that's in the process isn't subjected to a new regulation set by, you know, my concern with these unelected bodies. You know, they changed the rules midterm, and so now you're halfway there and you got some new things you have to do, and you're talking about more costs, and certainly it really could, I think, impact the development of these additional, you know, peakers.
Well, I know that, I mean, I at least hope that the various agencies responsible for energy production in the state don't want to cause companies that are prepared to provide that to decide not to. The goal, we have to keep the lights on. We have to meet our electrical and energy standards. But I certainly would be happy to pursue that further, because that is, you point out something, it's not the goal to have companies that have made their commitments, they're breaking ground, they're doing all that they can and need to do to suddenly have to shift gears. So I'm more than happy to work on that.
Thank you.
Senators urged an aye vote. I've forgotten if someone has made a motion.
I make the motion.
Senator Leno, thank you.
I just one comment.
Senator Papley.
Have you met with anyone from the Energy Commission and Energy Commissioner?
Yeah. Yes, we have. We have.
With the commissioner, I
Yes.
would walk through this with them
Yes.
because you can't get a bill signed probably
Without
if
that,
you don't
yes.
have an understanding of how, because your objective is good. I respect the Energy Commission, but just the political realities of this challenge, they should
Well-
be able to work with you to see. You may have to change the bill to some extent, but whatever.
And I appreciate that. We have met.
Commissioner.
Yes, yes.
Commissioner.
We have done that, and yes, there are, I'm sure there are challenges on this, but I think this is an important issue. I think the approach is a good one. It has been tried and tested, and you're right. We're sort of trying to think a little bit outside the box, and we need to bring in some of those players to assist us, and certainly open to that.
Well, I would encourage you to continue speaking with the stakeholders. We have a motion. Oh, did you? Oh, yes. Please call the roll, Assistant.
Item 4, SB 180 by Senator Jackson. The motion is due pass as amended and refer to Committee on Appropriations. Senators Wieckowski?
Aye.
Wieckowski, aye. Gaines? No. Gaines, no. Bates? No. Bates, no. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Leno? Aye. Leno,